Lead from the Side is made in partnership with Performance Leadership, a co-venture of Western Bulldogs and Victoria University. Hi, I'm Spencer Casimir, and this is Lead from the Side. Today's guest is Matti Clements, currently the Executive General Manager and Director of AIS Performance at the Australian Institute of Sport. There, she was also Acting Chief Executive Officer, People Development and Wellbeing Director, and Deputy Director, Athlete Wellbeing and Engagement. Previously, she was also the Director and Senior Psychologist of Mental Edge Consulting and has had other roles at the AFL and AFL Players Association. Matti, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
How does a psychologist get into sport and all of these different roles?
I started my interest in psychology actually off the back of sport. I was a very average sports person, but saw a real opportunity at that point in time that psychology, and particularly at that time, the performance element of psychology could play in elite sport. And then as became quite clear that I was not going to reach any elite heights as a sports person, I thought, how else can I get and remain involved in sport? And performance psychology presented as a real area of interest. So I stepped into that to do the education, and then got the great opportunity of starting my very, very first job at the South Australian Sports Institute as a PhD scholar and intern psych. And it went from there.
In terms of sports psychology specifically, talk about what that development has been like since you've been on board.
I started in my early career as a performance psychologist, so looking at things that we talked about directly impacted performance. After, I'd say, a couple of years, it became apparent to me that that absolutely is an important element of elite performance. However, well-being is also just as critical, particularly to sustainable high performance. So there was a real opportunity there to step into that space and understand more how well-being, not just of the athlete, but the entire high performance population could and should benefit sustainable performance. So I think we've seen a change in understanding of that role over the last decade. I think we've seen an evolution into psychology and all the elements that can impact performance from there, including wellbeing and mental health.
What are the big finds that we found so far in being more holistic with looking at the person, not just as the performance of the athlete on and off the field?
Intuitively, we do recognise that a healthy functioning person is a great base in order to do the 1%ers really, really well. And that's probably how I like to think about the performance psychology bit, is the 1%ers. What is the difference between a silver and a gold? It is a lot mental, I think. But in order to be able to do that, you have to have really strong foundations. And those strong foundations are well-being.
And that little edge between gold and silver is just a millimeter. But the actual leap to that level where everybody else is meters. And
this has probably increased further as social media has increased across the entire world, that people have a level of insight into elite athletes and coaches' lives that they never have had before. And that can be absolutely good or bad. Perhaps people can sit on the couch, for instance, and say, hey, why didn't they do this? I would have done this if I was in that situation. What social media doesn't give is all the emotional. You don't get that true emotional side of what it's like to be in that moment and to make decisions when the environment is highly emotive. So their rational, logical brain, in hindsight, is going, well, why didn't the person make this decision? Well, there's a whole heap of factors in there that perhaps you haven't got in your own experience that also impact that decision. And nor are we privy to all the hard work that goes on behind the scenes for that one moment in time. Not just the training, but also what does the rest include? Because that is part of an elite athlete's performance, the rest. What are they doing in terms of their own personal education? There's all these other things that is part of an elite athlete and an elite coach and many administrators now as well, part of their weekly practice. Of a similar nature, I've heard many Olympic and Paralympic gold medalists say the hardest thing to do is to defend that title, because in the lead up and to that moment in time of that first performance, they are chasing, then they become the thing that is being chased, and the change in mindset being significant.
Easton Wood, who was previously on the show and, as we know, was the captain of the grand final winning side for Western Bulldogs, did talk about his transition to the captain of a side that won a grand final and how being a captain in different positions of success also greatly changed his experience.
Absolutely. Because organizations, teams, systems require different types of leadership at different points in their own journey. Just because you are the right fit as a leader at one point in time doesn't mean you're the right fit when that system, that organization or that team changes. So this thinking that the leader will just go the whole journey and or be well skilled or well suited to do that, I think is wrong.
Well, let's talk more about what you're doing and what the Australian Institute of Sport does, both domestically for those people here, but also for those overseas that aren't as familiar with this sort of structure.
Yes, so our role at the Australian Institute of Sport is to lead the Australian sports system in terms of the sports related to the Olympic, Paralympic and Commonwealth Games. Not only do we invest, so we are the most significant investor in just about all these sports, being money from the federal government. We also, really importantly, do the big system things that sports individually are not best placed to do. So, for instance, we implemented the National Athlete Wellbeing and Engagement Program. So that includes things such as a national mental health referral network that current and alumni athletes can all access at no charge to them. It makes no sense, Spencer, for each organisation to have that individually set up. We deliver, in conjunction with the sports needs, various professional development and personal development programs, not just for the athletes, but for the high performance directors, CEOs, performance support staff, etc. And that's not to say it's a cookie cutter approach. It absolutely is not. Each sport requires nuanced delivery and has nuanced factors that need development, and our teams create those opportunities.
You know, in that construct, how do you feel your leadership shows? What's your style in terms of your role?
To be frank, my leadership style has changed significantly, and in particular in this new role as head of the AIS. At the core, it hasn't, but the way I've had to deliver my leadership at different points has needed to be adjusted. So my natural inclination is I'm very, very people focused. I love spending time with people. I love hearing what their experiences are. So that hasn't changed. And by nature, I would say I'm very collaborative. I like to understand, learn, and then come up with a solution that everyone can feel they have had some level of input into, and therefore they've got greater likelihood to engage in the outcome. I also believe in having fun. And I think that is something that I have grappled with over my leadership journey. And I think that's probably a work in progress for me at different points. But I do think humour is an undervalued leadership skill, because I think what humour can do is change the feel in a room in order to allow others to have a voice.
Want to develop your leadership potential this October? Join the Western Bulldogs and Victoria University for Performance Leadership, a 2-day program offering unparalleled insight into leading in dynamic, high-performance environments. Places for the October 5th and 6th intake are limited, so prospective attendees are encouraged to visit education.westernbulldogs.com.au to register interest today. When people talk about being a C-blank-O, the perception is those roles, you're going to have to be not necessarily barking out orders, but maybe not as collaboratively as you would like.
Absolutely, Spencer. I would say the last 18 months for me have been a steep but valuable learning curve in my leadership, because there are traditional views of how people should lead, and that is very much the barking out of orders, no questions asked. I don't believe that leadership style is suited to most environments now. I think there might be moments in time where that has value, but I don't think that is an effective way to lead over time. And I think that is the true art of leadership, that there are really important moments throughout a week where you don't need to be the loudest voice in the room. Maybe ask a couple solid questions and listen. And that is the most important role you play at that point in time. And then there absolutely are other moments where a group, a system is looking at you to make a final decision, and you need to recognise that and step into that moment. But this one size fits all, I'm going to bark, I'm going to scream, and I know everything. I don't know everything, Spencer. And I unashamedly admit that. There are far greater minds in most rooms than me, and I want to hear what they've got to say. But sometimes the decision will sit with me and I can stand behind that. But I don't have to be the smartest person in the room. And I know I'm not.
Raylene Castle said on the show that a chief executive officer is usually not the smartest person in the room. And she is one.
Yes. And she is really smart.
Exactly. And she is very smart.
Is really smart. But I also think part of being a great leader and who I've admired on my own career are people that have humility. Humility is a really important leadership skill. Authenticity, and I think even more so now than a decade ago, an incredibly important skill for great leadership. If you are true and you are you, it is a lot easier to lead because you're not trying to be someone you're not, and therefore investing energy ineffectively to present in a way that is honestly not how you function or how you are. Acknowledging when you've stuffed up, acknowledging or putting it on the table, I don't know. Let's work out what I need to know. I think that's true leadership.
I think we're seeing a very positive trend amongst great leaders. They are trying to be what they think a leader should be. But at the end of the day, they find out that being themselves is what got them to be in that position in the first place.
Absolutely. And I think, Spencer, when I talked about those first couple of months, and I've acknowledged this openly on multiple occasions, I tried to be something I'm just not. And it was tiring. And also it was not that enjoyable, to be frank, rather than going, okay, I've got this opportunity. I'm going to be me because A, that's a lot easier for me to be consistently. So therefore people know what they're going to get in interactions with me. But also it was going to be more enjoyable. I was going to actually give it a red hot shot, just being me. And if I failed, at least I failed being me rather than trying to be someone I'm not and not enjoying the process of it.
The idea is that we go through these processes to get to become leaders. Then we can be ourselves in that capacity through the time and work that we've put to get there. We had Justin Rodsky on the show, and he talked about trying to be the leader that someone else thought he should be and how it just didn't work.
And I can relate to that. And to your earlier point, I'm not 100% certain I ever strived to be a leader. I think what I've done is be deeply passionate about things. And as I said, I love being around people. I love seeing people grow. I love being part of something greater. And that has led itself to having leadership roles. But I'm not sure I ever aspired that I'm going to be a leader of something and it doesn't matter what it is. I don't think that's driven me. It's more about what I can be part of and do with and on behalf of something bigger than me. And that's the opportunity I've got now. I love being part of a great industry, something that is far greater than my moment in this role. I think people need to belong, Spencer, and finding something small or great where you feel you can contribute and be part of and therefore belong is critical to a high-performing team, but also sustainable performance.
What do you feel the need for stability is, given that the world has been so turbulent that jobs have been much more ephemeral in their permanence to a person's life in a specific role based on what's going on today here in Australia, at least?
Stability, I think, is an interesting one in sport because things do constantly change, and that's okay. So to want, at least in the system I work in, the industry I work in, to want everything to be stable, you're asking for something it's by nature not. Absolutely, we saw extremes of that, didn't we? With the postponement of the Tokyo Games. That absolutely threw the system into moments of chaos, etc. But what we also saw was the opportunity that came with that, and our industry united. So there were some really great things that came from that we could then learn and develop from. I don't know, I'm not convinced on this concept of stability. Complete chaos is not good or healthy, but wanting everything to be the same, I don't think is realistic.
So maybe we should differentiate stability from stagnancy.
Yes, and I think, Spencer, that's where we don't. Stability perhaps is knowing roles, goals, vision, purpose, knowing that things are going to look different within reason and we're going to be in it together to resolve it. That would, for many, I would hope, provide a sense of stability. And I think that is important to have.
The only thing that's consistent other than death and taxes is change.
Yeah, correct. And not wanting things to change means you're going backwards because everyone else is going to move forward.
So in that sense, in what ways are you leading innovation in your field?
I think innovation is a really interesting word. It gets thrown around a lot. We absolutely at the AIS have deep expertise, individuals who are highly, highly innovative. Some of the work particular areas do in machine learning and artificial intelligence and engineering, some of the sports science in terms of rest hub work in preparation for games. They are absolutely innovative, world leading, etc. Then there's other innovation. And the other innovation is around people. What is a high functioning team? What is the future of high performance teams in the industry I work in? Performance support staff, coaches, etc., all working together in order to problem solve something that is related often to an athlete-specific campaign or performance. So I think the word sometimes grates on my nerves a little bit because I think everyone wants to be innovative or likes to use that word because they think that will potentially create more investment, for instance, or opportunity there, but also it sets them apart. There's lots of different ways to be innovative, and some of those things are foundational and critical to high performance.
It is a bit tarnished because it gets thrown around as a buzzword. The need to innovate for the sake of innovation is very questioned now.
And Spencer, the other part of that being innovation in isolation may not be a performance advantage. It's like a spider web. High performance programs, teams, organisations are like a spider web. One implementation in one area should by nature have some tentacles into another area. Now, if that's not considered in its implementation, you actually don't know whether it will be a performance advantage. It could actually be a performance disadvantage in that other area. So I think one of the key things in successful and sustainable high-performing teams is thinking about the tentacles or the web.
So we did talk about how you started and who you are, how it's changed what you've gone through over the last 18 months. We've talked about Tokyo. We touched on the tough conversations.
Yes.
What's your approach when you have to have that chat with someone?
I think by nature, Spencer, I'm quite conflict adverse. And it is something that absolutely over the last 5 or 6 years, I've needed to get more experience at and more comfortability with being uncomfortable. I know that's a cliche, but my approach to dealing with conflict is difficult conversations need to be had many, many times a week. If you do it with authenticity and empathy, not sympathy, but empathy, you have a greater likelihood that the content of that conversation is going to be heard. Now, that's not always going to be the case, but you have a greater likelihood, I believe. So it comes back to my leadership style. I am authentic. I will intro a difficult conversation with, this is going to be tough to hear potentially, but my job is to give you this feedback, and then it's up to you what you decide to do with that. I can't make someone do anything. I think if it feels that it's coming from the right place, there's a greater likelihood it's going to land. And it's the same with making difficult decisions around investment, et cetera, et cetera. If it's honest, upfront, they're not going to like it, but at least they're going to hear it and respect you've had that conversation. You've got to be authentic and honest.
Is it different when it's the individual or when you have to address the group, when it's an externality to your own leadership into the difficulties that are going on?
It feels different delivering it, but is it different? It's still based on the same principles. I'm going to be honest and authentic when I deliver it. If I feel not distressed, that's not accurate, but you know that if I feel a certain way, I'm going to show that. I don't think delivering a message with a stone face is helpful. You be authentic. Your message needs to match. Your body language needs to be honest.
You bring up body language. There's a child in my daughter's kinder who's nonverbal, and it's actually today manifested in being more aware, not just of the child who is nonverbal, but the fact that we all communicate that way as well.
Absolutely. I know I keep coming back to this word authentic, but I think it's so real and important. If your words and your delivery are authentic, they will match. So therefore, you aren't providing confusing messages, verbal or nonverbal, because they're aligned. Therefore, you've got greater likelihood of it being heard and understood.
That's well said. It's actually a great way to hit our final point. What's some good leadership advice you wish you knew sooner?
I wish, Spencer, I knew it was okay just to be you and be a leader. I wish I had have had those conversations earlier, because it would have made those first 3 months a lot more enjoyable. A lot more enjoyable. I think if you can't walk away from a day having learnt something new, you've missed a shot there. Every day there's something pretty cool to learn, and you usually learn it from the team around you.
On that note, you can follow Matti and the organizations she's currently involved with on Twitter at the AIS, along with LinkedIn and other social media channels. Thank you all for joining us today. And Matti, thank you for being on the show.
Pleasure.
Thanks for listening today, and thanks to our sponsors. More information about the show and our guests can be found in the show notes. You can follow the show on Twitter or LinkedIn at Lead From The Side, or myself on Twitter or LinkedIn at BallsOutPhD. If you want to contribute to the show, send us an email at leadfromtheside@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you. See you next time, and remember to lead from the side.